See a passionate crowd out here, and thanks to Boys in Blue for keeping care of us. I've just come from a funeral this morning, and there's no question that death brings it home to us, as does misadventure. And there's no question that some of you here, just looking around some of the placards, have had children who've suffered because of an adverse event following vaccination. And just while we're standing here, and I'm not standing hot, but we might also just give some thought to also those parents who've lost their children to vaccine preventable illness. Okay, so there's no question that you can live a healthy life without vaccine. There's no question that vaccine will be an attempt to bring in a compensation scheme for children who are severely damaged by vaccine. So they're acknowledging that a small number of children have catastrophic consequences. What we're not acknowledging is that for some children those consequences are subtle, but all pervasive, and can be terribly detrimental for the life trajectory of those children. At the moment I'm counselling a lot of young men, some of who are on probation for some sort of criminal offence. It's often trivial, but there can be a whole host of things, from driving under the influence or domestic violence or an assault, all sorts of things. What we do know is that a lot of, when you go down and grind down and started looking at how people are functioning in terms of the cognitive functioning, their emotional functioning, often there are deficits. Our prisons are full of youth and older who've had some sort of deficit as a consequence of whatever. If we look at something like autism, for instance, okay, and there's a whole spectrum of autistic problems. Some of those children, when you speak to, when you listen to the stories, okay, some children have had, let's say, scarlet fever. And after that, the mother says the child just wasn't the same after that. Not infrequently, the mothers will say, my child had a vaccine, and my child was just not the same after that. So there's a whole range of environmental toxins, okay, inclusive, I believe, of vaccines, that can cause damage to our children. One of the great difficulties we have is that we haven't researched these issues sufficiently. So, for instance, we know that if we look at something like autism, and the jury's still out, we look at autism, we know that the children who are at risk are children whose mothers, for instance, have had a lack of oxygen or ischemia or hypoxia during birth, or some other uterine insult. Let's say the mum's had a severe viral infection during pregnancy, or she had a difficult delivery and a seizure and the baby's been without oxygen for a while. More in fact if the child is male. So often those children are at risk, and yet we tend to have one size fits all. So we tend to say, look, all children are the same, you're through that, you're better off not being vaxxed than not. And the fact is that we just don't have the information. We don't have the research. We certainly don't have the research around the subtle sequelae that can follow from vaccination. And this is the difficulty. We need transparency of data. We need a more sophisticated research approach. And we need to take the parents seriously. Whether or not be a mum or a dad, whether or not you're a teacher or a doctor or a pharmacist or a police officer or whoever, right? You guys as parents know your child better than anyone else. You know your children. And you'll know that something's not right. You'll know that there's been a punctuating event, whatever that is. You're the expert on your children. And I think that it's important that the parents' concerns are taken seriously. As I said, one of the big problems we have in medicine is a distortion of the data. And look, I had on my iPhone, but there's a very interesting editorial. It doesn't pertain to vaccine. It pertains to dietary advice around polyunsaturated fats and heart disease. It's an editorial by a guy called Flavia Coleman. I think it's on around about the 5th of February 2013. So he's looking at dietary advice around, nothing to do with vaccines, but dietary advice around heart disease. Basically to give you just a brief snapshot of what that study was all about. They had 800 men who'd had heart disease, either a heart attack or a crescendo angina. They had heart disease. And they flip the coin, right, 400 go there, you take the doctor's advice, 400 you go there, and you know what to do, you know, live a healthy life. After 36 months, they stopped the study because the group that took the doctor's advice died earlier from all causes. Heart attack, stroke, and cancer. Hello. If we go further in that, that editorial, it highlights the issue that over half of all completed biomedical research is not published. And moreover, the raw data on which their conclusions are based are not open to third-party scrutiny. So this is a major problem. It's a major problem for science. We know that there's bias within the system. Now, how much of that is criminal and how much is that human bias in terms of wanting to get an outcome? And we know that within the biomedical research industry, it's publish or perish. And if you publish something in favour of your drug or your vaccine, you're much more likely to get your career going forward. That's just a fact. So where are we in this Commonwealth? And we fought 2 world wars for freedom in this country. My grandfather fought in World War I and suffered, came back with post-traumatic stress. Was almost homeless at one stage. My father fought in World War II. Also, and I'll acknowledge now, okay, before we go beating up the Americans, that were it not for the Americans, we would have been invaded by Japan. So let's not forget that, okay? Let's not forget that. Having said that, okay, if we come back to the point at hand, the point is, look, I think that whether or not you're pro-vax or anti-vax, often parents are passionate about the welfare of their children. They're very really concerned, okay? And so that I think the pointing into this is the vaccine, but there's other factors as well. And often we've ignored the environmental and lifestyle factors. With autism up until the present time, for instance, we're told, well, it's polygenetic. There's something wrong with your genes. That's why your child has got autism. We hear the same sort of thing with cancer. Whereas we know that really the major causes, whether it be neurological dysfunction in our children, autoimmune disease in our children, we're seeing a lot of allergy now that we weren't seeing a generation ago. All right? So all the rising rates of cancer, there's something going wrong with our human immune system. There's something wrong here that we need to explore further and take seriously. So these are important issues. And although this is a small crowd, it's important that we voice our concerns. So I'm not going to go and bash the parents who want to vaccinate their child, and neither am I yourselves. I think that your experiences are real and they're valid. They need to be listened to and taken seriously. We need good research, and we don't have it at this stage. Certainly, I think working in general practice, one is very mindful that we are in the how often have you gone to a GP, and we try to do our best, and sometimes we could do better than we do. But often it's just script, all right? So we become churning through the scripts. And we're ignoring the lifestyle issues. You know? I used to be a passionate supporter of vaccine. I used to consider you guys the lunatic fringe. Okay? And now I'm saying, well, hang on, what's going on here? I needed to be hit over the head by a bit of 4B2. In 2009, when my patients came in for the swine flu vaccine, they said, Doc, are you sure this is safe? Because the vaccine company is being indemnified by the government. I said, look, I'm sure it is. So I got myself a whack in the shoulder, and there you go, all right? Subsequent to that, I noticed a few little splinter hemorrhages in my bed nails. I thought nothing of it. And a little while later, I found myself in the stroke unit in Gosford Hospital. I was throwing off a few emboli. It's purely anecdotal. It doesn't necessarily mean very much. It goes under the radar. But in my experience, when you look for it, vaccine side effects are much more common than we actually give it credit. They're there, and they're not being investigated. And I think that I'm honouring the parents who've lost children to vaccine preventable diseases, because I have seen in my career, I've seen children who've been affected by rubella in pregnancy, and it's devastating for those parents. Just as devastating as it is for parents whose children's developmental trajectory has been punctuated by a vaccine. They say the child was never the same after. So we're looking at both sides of the coin. Both parents, both mothers deserve our compassion. And the only way through this is with impartial evidence. We're not getting that. So you've heard a lot about about the malfeasance, the corruption within the medical system. It is there, unfortunately. As I said, some of that is out and out corruption. Some of that is perhaps just bias. And some of it is wishful thinking. So we can all be hypnotised by our paradigm, okay? And I think that within medicine, we've been very focused on the drugs and not enough on lifestyle. Our lifestyle is incredibly important, okay? If you look at something like meningococcus, which is a terrible disease, and I've certainly cared for children in intensive care units who we've saved, but they've lost their nose, their ears, their fingers, their toes. It's a terrible situation. And certainly speaking as a doctor who's seen this, I said, my God, bring on the vaccine. I don't want to see this. I don't want to have to deal with this. And every other day you'll hear about the wonders of the meningococcal vaccine and how important it is. But what we don't hear about is that in families and households where there's a smoker, the mortality rate, the infant mortality rate is 4 to 20-fold increased in a smoking household. And that's not to put down some of you good people who may be smokers. The underlying problem's trauma that hasn't been dealt with. So the thing is, what we need is parents whose children have been, we need a transparent and level playing field. We need to listen to all the mums and all the dads about what's happened to their children. The only way through this, and these are very emotionally charged issues, you'll find that this is polarising, and that polarisation is not always helpful, because what we're looking for is the truth. And the truth is that yes, vaccines do some good. Yes, vaccines do some harm. Yes, you can live a good, healthy life without vaccines. And yes, you know, there are issues around protecting our children and how we best do that. These are difficult issues. The only way through this is with impartial research at arm's length from industry. We really need this. We need the research. It needs to be impartial. At the moment, I feel general practice is really letting us down because we're really focused on prescribing the drug. So what we need is to empower general practice with front-end loading, all right? Loading the database in, loading the database about what are the symptoms, what are the problems, what are the potential problems here, when was the vaccine given, what was the side effect, but not really get up to really get that information out. So until we've got a level playing field, until we've got the research, we're going to have this polarisation. So parents deserve to be heard. And you've heard a lot of very good speakers here. I'm giving you just a slice from the medical opinion. It's not straightforward. When I've raised these issues with my colleagues, a lot were vilifying me, but quite a number were anonymously saying, look, I agree with you, but I'm not prepared to be anonymous. So the thing is, we need transparency. We need to get away from scapegoating people as being Fruit Loops or the lunatic fringe. We need to get the data. We need to analyse it at arm's length. I have to say, I just want to thank all of you for your passion, your commitment. We need to remain steadfast and united. We need to push for transparency. We need to push for a moratorium on this. I'm very mindful that they're going to bring in this compulsory, this vaccination for mothers. The big problem in science, you need your case controls, ideally randomised, to see what's happening to the kids who were vaccinated, what's happening to the kids who weren't vaccinated, what are the subtle changes we're missing. And one of the very early situations we have when a child's first born, there's the gaze with the mother, there's that interaction with the mum, okay? But we don't have any way of clinically recording that unless you go looking for the data, unless you go looking for the clinical signs, and often parents will say, there's something not right here. We need better science and better application of science to sort this thing out. In the meantime, okay, the best thing we can do for our children is a healthy lifestyle and address the interior milieu, a healthy lifestyle, plant-based diet, avoid the smoking. If you are a smoker, get some help, okay? And be passionate about your children and try to just keep searching for the truth. Thank you all. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And if you want to buy this book today, Monkey Business, for $25, or you can find it on Amazon or Kindle. So, but I'm sure if you ask them nicely, they may even sign it for you.